Okay, we're up to Daf Chaf Dalid Amid Beis, and we're up to Omar Mar. We have a brisa that we quoted earlier. Mishum Rabbi Yossi Aglili Omu Ein Kosvin Af Ein Kosvin Olav Gite Nosh. We cannot use the back of the animal, the live animal, as a slate, as a document to inscribe a get. My time with Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Why does Rabbi Yossi Aglili disqualify the animal as a get? Sanya, we learned in a brisa. The Torah says because of law, Sefer Krisus in Parshas Kitetze. And Sefer indicates that we need a parchment. In fact, if you'll take a look in Sefer Yirmiyah, Perek Lamed Vav, that's where we learn a lot of the halachas of Shtaros with regard to Baruch ben Neriah, who wrote and committed to writing as a dictation from Yirmiyah, the Nevuah of Yirmiyah. And it says over there that it was written down on a sefer, which means a parchment or a scroll. Ainly el sefer. Minayin l'rabos kol davar. Kol davar means either a wooden tablet or an olah shel zayis, a leaf of an olive. Talmud lo v'kosav la mikol makol. So the v'kosav la is now a ribui because it says la. We don't need the extra word la. Rashi says kigo luach eitz ole zayis. The kosav mikol makom. The motzi l'meimer could have said v'nasan biyadah sefer krisus, and instead it says the kosav la sefer krisus. No, and came matam alom sefer, but the Torah seems to imply that you need a sefer, and certainly an olah shel zayis does not qualify, or a luach eitz does not qualify as a sefer, and that we derived from the pasuk in Yirmiyah. Lo malacha ma sefer davar she'ein bo ruach chaim ve'eno ochel af kol davar she'ein bo ruach chaim ve'eno ochel. So you can write the get on something that is similar to a sefer. Number one, it's inanimate, it has no breath of life. And number two, it's not an ochel, it's not edible. Now, in the cases of luach eitz and olah shel zayis, we have number one, a davar she'ein bo ruach chaim, and it's not an ochel. However, in a case of a live animal, it has a ruach chaim. So we're missing one of the two conditions for sefer, and that is davar she'ein bo ruach chaim. Here, in the case of an animal, it's a davar she'yesh bo ruach chaim. Now the Gemara has to explain the chachamim, who say that you could write a get on an animal. Ikasa bas sefer. If it would have said bas sefer in the sefer, then kida ka'amrit, you would be correct. But hashla dechsiv sefer l'sfiras dvarim bi alma hu diasi. If it would have said bas sefer, or bis sefer, would indicate that the pasuk is describing the material on which the get is being written. But it doesn't say bis sefer, but rather it says sefer, and sefer comes to tell you the nature of the content of the get. It's got to be a sfiras dvarim, which means that it has to contain the words Hareat Muteres L'Chol Adam. It's got to indicate that this document is a sefer krisus that severs the bond between me and you and allows you to marry another man. For Abanon, hi v'kosav my darshibe. After all, Rabbi Yossi derived from v'kosav that there's a certain limitation, and the surface, the material on which the get is written, has to be a davar she'ein bo ruach chayim. And the Gemara answers, "Hahumi boile." In fact, the Rabbanan need this pasuk, v'kosav, to teach us that b'ksiva miskareshes ve'ena miskareshes b'kesef. Salke da'itchad mino hoil the iskash yitzia lahavaya. They're the very famous hekesh of Kiddushin, which is called Havaya, and Yitzia, which is Gerushin, and this is based on a pasuk. The Gemara doesn't quote the pasuk, but it says V'yatza mi beso v'holcha v'hoisel ish acher. So Yatza is referring to get, and v'hoisel ish acher is referring to marriage to another man. So the juxtaposition, the hekesh of the Yatza v'hoisa teaches me that halachas that apply in Kiddushin will be transferred and applied to Gerushin. Therefore, we might think that if he gives her kesef and he's megarisha by paying her off, that would be valid, like it is in Kiddushin. Kamash Malan. Now I need the pasuk of the kasav to teach me that it's got to be a ksav and not kesef. Gemara asks Rabbi Yossi Haglili, "Hi svar minole." How does Rabbi Yossi Haglili know to exclude kesef for gerushin? Me sefer krisus nafkale. He derives it from the fact that the Torah says v'kosav law sefer krisus, and that teaches me that it's got to be a sefer karsa. The sefer is breaking up the ishus and severing the relationship between him and her, but v'ein davar acher karsa. Now the Rabbanan, who they have a different derivation that excludes kesef, and that's because it says sefer krisus. So v'idach, what are they going to do with this formulation of sefer krisus? Again, the Rabbanan derive it from the kosav and not v'nosan kesef. So what's sefer krisus teaching me? It's got to be something that creates a complete krisus. She's no longer connected to him. Like we learned in the Brisa, if it means that for the rest of her life she won't drink wine, or alternatively, she'll never go back to visit her father. Ain't that krisus? She is completely tied to him for the rest of her life in order to validate the get. That get is now not a davar akores beino leveino. But if he gives her a stipulation, kol shoshim yom, for 30 days you won't visit your dad, or you won't drink wine, then I raise that krisus. That's already a severance. For idach, how does Rabbi Yossi Haglili know that if he keeps her hanging on with a tanai that's the olam, it invalidates the get? Nikares krisus nafka. The Torah says v'kasavla sefer krisus. It could have shortened it to say v'kasavla sefer kares. And the krisus is telling me that we need an absolute krisus where she's not attached to his apron strings anymore. The idach, what about the Rabbanon? Kares krisus lo darsha. They think the word krisus is a natural choice for the Torah. The Mishnah says, if a man sets up his sukkah amongst the lonos, the fanos law, and now the trees will serve as the fanos, kshera. Now, this is not to be confused with the mission that we had on Daf Chaf Beis, because there, the ground where the Elon is actually serving as the floor of the sukkah. Here, we're using not the sukkah to rest upon the Elon, but rather the Elon and its branches are serving as a dofen. And that's kosher. Omer of Achabar Yaakov, Kol mechitza sheni yachol lamod b'ruach mitzuya ein mechitza. If a normal velocity expected wind will blow down the mechitza, that's not a mechitza. So now we have to know, what is Rav Acha going to do with branches of a tree, which our Mishnah validates as a mechitza. Tanan, ha'osa sukosu beino ilonos, v'ilonos defanos lo, shera, v'ka ozil v'yasi. After all, the trees functioning as the sickle walls will now be blown from side to side. Hachamayaskinon, Bikashim. We're talking about the trunk of the tree is very tough and it cannot be blown and swayed back and forth. The Gemara immediately objects, but what about the branches? The branches are also serving as the fanos, and they will certainly blow in the wind. And the answer is the Avid Leba Hutza the Daphna. He strengthens the branches of the tree by supporting them with different kinds of palm branches. So why then is the Mishnah coming to be machadish something? What's the chiddush of the Mishnah? And the Gemara answers, I would have said, since he's using the branches of this tree as the fanos, he might come to benefit from the branches. And this, if he happens to do this on Yontif itself, let's say he places an object leaning on the branches of the tree, he violates a Gzeira D'Rabbanan that the Rabbanan instituted, acted that you're not allowed to benefit from a tree on Shabbos. Kamash Malon, the Tana wants to be machalish to us that we're not afraid. Maybe it's a Gzeira that you're telling me he might lean on the tree, and leaning on the tree itself is a Gzeira because he might come to pluck something off the tree. Toshma. Now, once again, we have an objection to Rav Acha bar Yaakov. Hoyasham Elon o Goder o Mechitzas Akonim Nidon Mishum Diomet. That when we're trying to enclose a wall, a cistern of water, and we set up diumadim on four corners to make that area outside the bar into Rishus Hayachid, so that you can stand there on the Sfas HaBar and draw water. If there's a large tree or a wall or vertical reeds, they can substitute for diumadim. And the Gemara assumes that a tree will sway in the wind, and certainly reeds will sway in the wind. How then can we validate these diumadim as mechitzos to set up a Rishus HaYachid around the bar, according to Rav Acha bar Yaakov, since they sway in the wind? That's a psul d'oraisa, it's not a mechitza. This is an answer that's going to repeat itself over and over again. He strengthens the tree or the reeds with different types of palm leaves. Oshma Ilana Masechet al ha'aretz. If you have a tree that the foliage covers a certain area, then it goes down and it reaches within 3 tfachim of the ground. If the branches of the tree will reach within 3 tfachim, and we can apply the principle of what? of lavud is then metaltal and tachta. We have a full-fledged area that's enclosed by mechitzos, and you're allowed to carry it in Rishus Hayoch. The Gemara asks, Amai, the branches are going to blow in the wind. How could they serve as a functional, reliable mechitza? He strengthens these branches by adding other branches of palm trees, and therefore it will not blow in the wind. Now you're telling me it's a full-fledged Rishus Hayochid that's completely surrounded by mechitzos. Then Alama Amar Rav Huna Bereder Rabbi Yeshua metaltal bo. Again, you deliberately set up the hutzah to strengthen these mechitzos, whether they are the Elon, the Gader, or the mechitzah kanim. Then obviously you are creating a mechitzah through human action. And if that be the case, then it loses its status as a karpaf. And yet, Alama, why does Rav Huna Bereder Rabbi Yeshua say ein metaltalin bo? And here we turn to Daf Chaf Hey, Ella Beis Hasayim. We only allow you to carry up to, or within, I should say, an area that's a Beis Hasayim that has the same size as the Azor in the Mishkan. And if it's larger than that, then even though technically on a Deraisa level we average to say Yachid, but Minarabanan it's considered a Carmelis, and a base, or a double base saw, which is called a Beis Hasayim, is 5,000 square amos, and that's the area equal to the area of the Azara in the Mishkan. But that Iser Derabanan of Carmelis only applies in low Hukaf Lidira. In this case, it was Hukaf Lidira. You actually surrounded this area deliberately for residential purposes. So why should we have the limit of a karpaf, of a carmelis, which means that we're prohibited from carrying 4 amos? And the Gemara answers, what he wants to use for this so-called canopy tree, the foliage of which circles and dips down to the ground, he wants to use it for a watchman, a security man who's out there in the fields. He needs a place to protect himself from the sun or possibly to sleep at night, so he goes into this canopy tree. The purpose here and the goal is not to live inside that area, but rather to allow him a place to run back into from the avir, but really it's protecting the avir. And kol dira shetash michel avir ein metalton bo ella sasan. Toshma, we learned in a brisa, Shavas betel shugavoa asara fuarba amos ad beis hasayim. So if he began his Shabbos and he was Kona Shvisa in a tel, small hill that is 10 tfachim in height, and it has an area that's at least a minimum of 4 amos, well, less than a base saw, then he's going to be permitted to go as much as 2,000 amos outside of this area. Another example is v'chein beneka shuamok asara. So you have a split in the mountain and a little bit of a cleft or a valley that is 10 tvachim deep, and it's me'arba amos at beis hasayim. V'chein, a third scenario, kama ktsura v'shibolos makifos osa. He has grains, right? That's kama and ktsura. He's already harvested them. And now he has a shiboles, makifanosa. He surrounds these grains with stalks, and it's at least 10 tefachim high. Mahalaches kula. In all these three cases, he can walk in within the entire enclosure. And he was Konesh Visa there, he gets 2,000 amma from that point. Anyway, we see that in the case of Kama Ktsura, which is certainly going to be blown by the wind, and nevertheless it's considered an enclosure, and it's got the status of a machitza. So standing stalks constitute a valid machitza. It's going to be blown and swayed by the wind. And this leads us to the mission of Shluchei Mitzvah, Pturim and Succah on Daf Chaf Hey, which will Mitzvah pick up after Shabbos. Wish you all a great Shabbos. Parshas